Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the peak-to-peak region, in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
Hungover teacher puts on a movie in the dark, retires to the lounge.
The song that you are currently listening to is called Spider Towns, and it's the title single from Old Pup's upcoming album, which will be out everywhere on February 28th, 2025. You can see Will Hansen performing solo as Old Pup at the Jamestown Mercantile the day before the album's wide release on February 27th. More details coming up later in the podcast.
Even when you haven't tied your toe, black brown, golden one, slithering house snake curls up beneath the old straw hat on the tired floor.
Hello there, everybody. My name is Jamie Lammers, and welcome to this week's Music of the Mountains, Where to Be and What to See, brought to you by the Mountaineer Podcast. Finally, I'm starting to get a regular podcast episode schedule back on track. We have plenty of segments prepared for the next couple of weeks, so be sure to tune in for a couple stories from Marianne Rosen, a couple scheduled Music of the Mountains episodes, and a community business spotlight. Before then, though, it's time to get into this week's Music of the Mountains episode with some preliminary announcements. First, if you haven't subscribed to The Mountaineer yet, and you're looking for something new to subscribe to in 2025, then be sure to head to the mtnear.com and click on the subscribe button in the top right corner of our homepage. From there, you can get full access to our digital archive and scanned copies of the physical newspaper, and you can choose to receive a physical subscription in your mailbox or send one to someone you love. If you're interested in getting advertising into the paper or podcasts, then be sure to head to the mtnear.com/advertise to learn more about the options that are available. If you want to ask questions directly, then be sure to email marketing@themountaineer.com or adsales@themountaineer.com or call 720-960-2900. I feel bad I didn't get a podcast segment out early enough in the week to promote two events that happened at the Nederland Community Center, particularly at the Backdoor Theater this past week. On Tuesday, February 18th, Joe Negussi spoke at the Backdoor Theater, and on Thursday, February 20th, the 20th annual Backcountry Film Festival was hosted at the Backdoor Theater. Sorry I didn't promote them on the podcast, but hopefully I'll be able to promote the next Backcountry Film Festival next year and be able to talk more about those past two events this week, sometime in the near future. For now, though, let's get into this week's Music of the Mountains. Our guest this week, do you mind introducing yourself real quick?
Yeah, my name's Will Hansen. On a tour right now promoting a new record for my folk project, Old Pup, and yeah, I think that sums it up for now.
That record is Will Hansen's sophomore effort as Old Pup, and you'll be touring across the U.S. to promote the new record. One of those stops is at the Jamestown Mercantile.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've played in Boulder a couple times, but I made friends with, Mike Clark by chance? He's from Pueblo, Colorado.
Not only do I know Mike Clark, I've interviewed him for Music of the Mountains. If you want to hear him talk about his project, The River Arkansas, when he performed last year in Nederland, along with a duo act from Silas Herman and Jack Clunan, then be sure to check out a Music of the Mountains episode featuring Mike and Jack from August of 2024. So yes, I do know Mike.
Yeah, he's great. But I met him on a tour last May, and we became buds, and he was helping me set something up, and he said that the Jamestown Mercantile is his favorite place to play in all of Colorado. So I'm super excited it worked out.
So how has Old Pup evolved over the years as a musical project for you? You're primarily based in Milwaukee, right?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, I feel like it's taken on a number of roles. Like it's been kind of a side project for a little while, and I feel like it's taken up more time recently, especially with a new record out and stuff. But I primarily play pedal steel as like a sideman in a number of bands around the Midwest. And so I would kind of just do like an Old Pup show if I had a little time open on the calendar or something fun came through. So now with the record out, I've definitely just decided to put some more energy into it and had a lot of fun doing longer solo tours. And I travel with my partner. And so, yeah, just been leaning into this one, which has been a lot of fun. And yeah, I guess it's kind of just like my songwriting project, and it features a ton of different friends in Milwaukee and around the country and playing in and out of the band. I'll be meeting up with some buddies along the way on the tour who will play with me, and I'll back them up. And so, yeah, that kind of, I think, sums it up for now.
But of course, before you adopted the name Old Pup, how did you, Will Hansen, get started in music in the first place? What inspired you to perform and write songs in general?
Yeah, I mean, I was always really interested in music and putzed around on guitar as a teenager and stuff. And I feel like I really started to get into it in a more like consistent, passionate way when my sister's now ex-boyfriend, but from like back in high school, burned me an Elliott Smith CD, and that ended up being a huge influence on me. I remember trying to very roughly figure out a lot of his songs on guitar and just being like really enamored with his arrangements and lyrics and feeling and everything. And so I feel like that was definitely a defining moment or artist to hear. And then just have been extremely curious and kind of meandered through different influences since then, obviously. But yeah, that was kind of the spark. I would kind of quietly write songs in high school, and I was too shy to share them really with anyone, so I was just doing it for fun, and then ended up getting more involved with some friends and playing in bands, and naturally started performing and stuff and just getting more cozy with it.
So out of curiosity, from that starting point when you were initially nervous to share your songs to now when you're releasing another record of your own music and performing live constantly, how have you worked on feeling more comfortable performing and sharing your songs?
I feel like just through exposure, probably. It definitely took me a while before I still feel like it's a lifelong thing. I don't know if I care less or if I'm just like more used to it and that's what makes it more comfortable. But yeah, I feel like it's just always different. But I don't know if there was like a defining moment where like a switch was flipped or anything. I think it was just through repetition.
And are there any major artistic influences that have stuck with you throughout your musical career?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Elliott Smith thread definitely isn't going anywhere. Still a huge influence. I've been also very influenced by David Berman from the Silver Jews, especially lyrically. Who else? Michael Hurley's also a big influence. I just love how both of those artists are like very uncompromising in their vision and also just beautiful weirdos and one of ones, and that really inspires me a lot. So yeah, there's a lot more names I could go on and on listing, but I think at the moment those are probably the biggest ones.
So when did the Old Pup project start, and where did the name come from?
Yeah, it started, I think like 2018 or 19, and I just had a ton of songs and wanted to put them in a bucket and have a name for it that I could gig with and stuff. And the name came from a Walt Whitman poem called Song of Myself. It's in Leaves of Grass, and the quote is, "I am old and young, of the foolish as much as the wise." And I really like that because it's kind of a nice paradox of like a wise fool, where a lot of the time I feel very clueless, but then there'll be moments of clarity or something or wisdom every so often. And so I feel like the wise fool sort of paradox led me to come up with the name Old Pup. It seemed like it was in a similar spirit.
So once you adopted this oxymoron and started performing as Old Pup, was that really the first time you started performing yourself and getting your songs out there?
Yeah, that was pretty much the first time. I had played like guitar and lap steel and pedal steel and stuff with other bands, but yeah, it was like the first project where I was the main songwriter, I guess.
I decided to look through the discography that Old Pup already has out. In 2022, Old Pup's debut record came out, Incognito Lounge. Do you want to talk a little bit about that record, how it came to be?
Yeah, that was recorded mostly live at a studio in Chicago called Treehouse Records. I'm not sure if they're still active at the moment. Doesn't matter. But anyway, that one was done with a cello player named Ben Bame and a bass player named Drew DeVente, who I think we've all been playing together for like 6 years now. They're still playing in the band and really good friends, and the drummer on those sessions and the bass player have since moved. But that was recorded like right before COVID, and didn't really know what to do with it during COVID, so I kind of waited for a while. It was done for like over 2 years before it ended up coming out, and yeah, it's definitely a different approach than the new one, where it was a lot of like live on the floor recordings, and this new one has some of those live elements, but it was all self-recorded and wasn't confined just to one studio. Some of the recordings were done in Milwaukee, some stuff in Chicago and New Orleans and New Mexico. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Treehouse Records is still active. You can find them on Instagram at Treehouse Records Chicago and head to their website at treehouserecordschicago.com to learn more about their recording spaces. But back to Old Pup. In regards to major releases on streaming services, Incognito Lounge is the primary big release. However, Old Pup also has a Bandcamp-exclusive EP called Lion. The EP is written, quote, from the perspective of a lion in the modern human world. You can buy a copy of that EP only at oldpup.bandcamp.com. But in regards to other releases that are available on streaming services, particularly on Spotify, which is my primary streaming service, you were featured on a song by another group called Fellow Kinsmen. The final track on their debut album, Where Were You, is called Trippin', and you're featured on that song. Do you want to talk about it a bit?
Yeah, totally. Nate Kinsman, who's the front man of that band, also he's the current drummer in Old Pup and has been for the last couple of years, and he's a really close friend of mine. And I also played pedal steel and lap steel in his band, Fellow Kinsman. I think we'd recently met each other, maybe just known each other for a few months, and he invited me to record some pedal steel on that song. And then we just started gigging together nonstop, and right now we're actually both co-engineering the new record for Fellow Kinsman, and yeah, it's always nice listening back to that one because it was just a really happy memory.
And your most recent release is Royal Street, which features you with Johanna Rose and Nick Gamer. Do you want to talk about this song a bit?
Yeah, well, actually, they're kind of spread out. Johanna Rose used to live in Milwaukee. When I first met them, they were living in a tree house in Vermont, and we met up in Milwaukee and became buddies and started playing a bunch of music together, and I had always wanted to go visit New Orleans and spend some, like, quality time there, so I hatched a scheme to find, like, a short-term rental and live there for 2 months, I think 2 years ago now, and so Johanna was super into it. We had another buddy from Chicago. We all pulled together and stayed down there, and Johanna's living there full time now and actually get to see them in a couple days on this tour, so that'll be sweet. But anyway, one of Johanna's good buddies, Nick Gamer, he lives in Portland, Oregon. He came to visit us in New Orleans, and one day Nick and Johanna were writing a song on the porch, and we had a little potluck with some friends over for dinner, and they showed us the song, and I set up my little cassette recorder and a few mics, and we all just gathered around the mics and did a couple takes, and honestly, I kind of forgot about it, and Nick hit me up like a year later and was like, whatever happened to that recording? We should release it. And I dig back through and put a mix together, and it's just nice to have that solidified as a memory. But yeah, it's kind of a long-winded answer, but they're great friends of mine and both incredible musicians and songwriters too. You should definitely check them out.
And looking through Johanna Rose's discography, I also found you featured on their song Carhartt Angel on the EP Can't Love You From the Ground. I assume this was one of your earlier collaborations with Johanna.
Yeah, definitely. That was shortly after we had met each other, and we were sending each other music through email from Milwaukee to Vermont, back to Milwaukee to Vermont, which was really fun.
So, in general, you love collaborating with other musicians. And that includes in Old Pup, where in as many shows as you possibly can, you include a band lineup. What does that band lineup look like over the years? Has it stayed consistent over the years? Has it changed over time?
Yeah, it's kind of, I feel like right now we've had a really solidified, strong group for like the last year or two now. But since the project started, I feel like I would just ask people who are playing the same show, like if there's a violin player, I'd be like, hey, do you want to play on this one and see? So it's always been very open to collaboration, and friends will come up and sing a song pretty frequently. But currently, the full band is Drew DeVente on bass, and we've been playing together for like 6 years, and Ben Boehm on cello, also been playing for like 6 years, and then Nate Kinsman on drums, and Ellie Jackson on flute and omnichord and backing vocals. And then I'll also do solo tours fairly frequently because it's tough out there. You got to make a little money and keep yourself going. So it'd be sweet to bring the band out for more of that stuff. But for now, it's been fun doing the solo troubadour sort of thing. But yeah, that's kind of where it's at as far as the band. And if I'm ever in the same city as Johanna, we're collaborating on stuff. So they're heavily involved too. And there's just a lot of friends in Milwaukee too that I called up to record parts on this record. So I think there's like 12 musicians or something. It's a good amount of collaboration.
For context in the timeline, we recorded this interview on February 14th, Valentine's Day. Is this primarily a solo tour?
It's primarily solo. Last night we did a full band show in Chicago at the Hideout, and then I'll be on this 2-week solo tour, and I'll play with Johanna in New Orleans, so I'll have like a duo thing there. But otherwise it'll be pretty much solo the rest of the way, and then we've got like a hometown record release show that'll also be with the band, and a couple other Wisconsin gigs that will be full band too.
And performing solo, with a duo, with a group of people in any number, have you had any preferences as to whether you perform by yourself or with a group of people? Are there pros and cons to both?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, full band is definitely the most fun and most preferred. I definitely want to do more of it. So I'd say, yeah, that's definitely my favorite. We also do a trio sometimes, and that's a lot of fun, and it's just easier financially to, I'd love to tour all the time with a 5-piece band, but still have a lot of work to do to get up to that point where it's sustainable. So I feel like that's a big factor in it. And I feel like I used to not really like playing solo as much, but I've kind of gotten more cozy with it and sort of opened myself up to different experiments with it to make it more enjoyable for me and, everyone listening, and just kind of taking it out of the box and chipped away at it for a handful of years. So it's become really rewarding doing it that way too. I feel like all the formats are very different, which also is kind of refreshing.
And over all that time performing by yourself or with other musicians in the area, do you have any particular favorite parts about performing live?
Yeah, I think, it's definitely fun to travel and make new friends. That's super special. And in terms of performing, I feel like my favorite thing is like along the same lines, making friends and playing in bands together. And there's one show in particular, my favorite bar in Milwaukee, sadly closed down, I think like a year and a half ago now. And basically like the whole folk country-ish scene played a farewell show there, and I was the resident pedal steel player for, I think it was like 8 or 9 different acts. It was like a 6-hour show. It was exhausting, but also like such a beautiful send-off to a lot of people's favorite place and a really beautiful community moment. We recently did kind of a similar show. My friend Katie put it together. It's called Holler Home, and it was a benefit for Hurricane Helene victims in Asheville, and especially artists and musicians there have been really affected, and we were able to raise a solid amount of money, and it was kind of like a showcase with a bunch of different friends. So yeah, I feel like just those moments are very near to me, and I think that's kind of my favorite part about it in like a more general sense.
And is there anything that you hope people take away from your shows in whatever capacity you're performing when they come to see you?
That's a good question. I hope they feel better than when they got to the show. That would be my goal. I don't know. I don't have any I really hope they like this one part or something, but I hope it's received and they have a good time and walk away feeling maybe slightly better than when they arrived.
So, your sophomore album as Old Pup is coming out. It's called Spider Towns, not Spider's Town, as I wrote in this week's Music of the Mountains column, but Spider Towns. So what are the highlights you want to mention with this new record, Spider Towns? Has the goal with this album been different from goals of your previous projects as Old Pup?
Yeah, I think this one I definitely spent a lot more time on lyrics There's some like longer songs that get kind of wordy, and I think that just had to do with like who I was reading and listening to. And I also had to feel like my discipline is bad with it, but I was attempting to write like 10 to 20 lines a night if I could, which I fell on and off that quite a bit, but just kind of having more of a consistent writing practice and reading a lot of poetry and short stories and listening to a lot of music. I think that was a big part of it, and also just wanting to get better at the craft of recording, because this one was all self-recorded. So I feel like I took my time. I didn't really have a hard deadline until I realized I was like, oh, there's 11 songs that are pretty much ready to go. So it was kind of the long road, I guess. It was just kind of recording for enjoyment and collaborating with friends, and then not with too much judgment, looking at however many songs I recorded over the span of like 3 years and picking out the ones that I thought made sense and sort of encapsulated a feeling.
And what's really funny, actually, is your album is coming out on February 28th everywhere. You'll be performing at Jamestown on February 27th. Your album's coming out the day after you perform here.
Yeah, end of February. It's kind of funny timing. I feel like it's maybe more recommended practice to do a tour after the release date, but I'm kind of heading home as it's coming out. But I've got vinyl records for sale. I got those early, so that's kind of the first way to listen to it, and then it'll be out digitally and all that at the end of the month. But I definitely feel like it translates the best to vinyl and might be the best way to take it in, so I've kind of just been following my gut with that. It's always weird releasing music because it feels like you hit a button and it's out on all these different streaming services, and I feel like that's a whole different can of worms with Spotify and the extremely meager pay from that. So I've been this record cycle just sort of going about it in a way that I feel the most comfortable with, because it really does feel like the Wild West as far as how do you put out a record independently and promote it and stuff. So yeah, I think so far so good. I'm still feeling good about it. We'll see how I feel in a couple weeks. But
Well, is there anything else involving Spider Towns or Old Pup or other performances or anything in general that you want to mention?
That's a good question. I feel pretty satisfied. I'm wondering, do you have any Jamestown recommendations? I'm turning it on you. As far as things to do there, or good like coffee spots or dinner spots.
Here's the truth of the matter. I have never been to Jamestown in person. I'm working to change that soon, but it hasn't happened for me yet. So, I don't have any particular recommendations off the top of my head. If any of you guys have been to Jamestown frequently and you want to send in recommendations for Jamestown destinations, then send us a text through this podcast episode's description. I'll talk more about that in a second, but in the end, I told Will that yes, because I've promoted the Jamestown Mercantile, probably the most out of anywhere else in Jamestown, that's the place I've heard most people talk about generally anyway.
Nice, yeah. It seems like a cool little town. Excited to check it out.
And we're all excited for you to come to the Peak to Peak area, Will. Thank you so much for coming on board and joining us for the podcast. We really appreciate your time. If you want to see Will Hansen performing to promote Old Pup's next record, Spider Towns, then be sure to head to the Jamestown Mercantile, located at 108 Main Street in Jamestown, on Thursday, February 27th, 2025, starting at 7 p.m. Spider Towns will be released everywhere the next day, Friday, February 28th, wherever you get your music. Be sure to support his music, including the Bandcamp-exclusive release Lion, and learn more about Old Pup by going to his Facebook page and his Instagram page, old.pup. And now, for this week's Music Mentions. Head to Busey Brews, located at 70 East 1st Street in Netherland on Sunday, March 2nd, starting at 2 p.m. to see Eric Richard Stone performing live. Head to Eldora Mountain Resort, located at 2861 Eldora Ski Road in Netherland, for the final performances of February 2025. Head over there on Wednesday, February 26th, starting at noon to see Sarah Banker in Timbers Tap House, on Friday, February 28th at 9 a.m. to see DJ Goody in the Boombox, and on Friday, February 28th at noon to see this month's artist-in-residence, Matt Flaherty, performing in Timbers Tap House. Head to the Gold Hill General Store, located at 531 Main Street in Gold Hill on Saturday, March 1st, starting at 7 p.m. to see Something Slight performing live. They'll be performing for the release of their brand new album, and they'll be bringing a special guest along. That special guest was announced today, and that guest will be Derek Dames Ole. So be sure to head over to Gold Hill General Store to check out the Something Slight album release party with Derek Dames Ole. Head to the Jamestown Mercantile, located at 108 Main Street in Jamestown, on Wednesday, February 26th, starting at 5 p.m. for an open mic night, on Thursday, February 27th, starting at 7 p.m. to see Old Pup performing live, and on Friday, February 28th, starting at 7 p.m. to see the High Road Home performing live. Knotted Root Brewing still hosts their regular music events, so be sure to head over to 250 North Caribou Street in Netherland every Wednesday at 6 p.m. for an open mic night, every Friday at 7:30 p.m. for a DJ night, every second Friday of the month at 7:30 p.m. for a reggae DJ night, and every Sunday at 5 p.m. for Jazz Sundays. Head to the Caribou Room, located at 55 Indian Peaks Drive in Netherland on Saturday, March 1st, to see Atomga performing live with Be Love Experience. Doors open and dinner starts at 7 p.m., and the show starts at 8 p.m. To get your tickets in advance, head to thecaribouroom.com. And finally, pick your preference. If you want to head over to Gilpin County, then be sure to head over to the Very Nice Brewing Company location at 180 Jankowski Drive in Blackhawk on Saturday, March 1st, starting at 5 p.m. to see Reservoir Fog performing live. If you want to head over to Netherland, then be sure to head over to the Very Nice Brewing Company location at 20 East Lakeview Drive, number 112 in the Caribou Village Shopping Center on Saturday, March 1st, starting at 5 p.m. to see David Williams performing live. Did we miss you or any of your performances? Do you want to submit your music listing in the Peak to Peak area? Do you have updates to your business or to your performances? Please call 303-810-5409 or email info@themountaineer.com to be included in the next print edition or the next podcast of The Mountaineer. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this week's Music of the Mountains, Where to Be and What to See, brought to you by the Mountaineer Podcast. Finally, I can confirm that on Monday, February 24th, I will be back with a segment brought to you by our correspondent, Marianne Rosen. I am so excited to bring that segment to you. But until then, if you want to share this episode or others with whoever you see fit, then be sure to head to the mtnear.com and scroll near to the bottom, or head to our podcast's main hub at the mtnearpodcast.buzzsprout.com to see a full archive of all of our episodes. Be sure to head to the mtnear.com/advertise to learn more about advertising options that are available. Or if you want to talk to me about advertising or any way to get involved in the podcast in any way, shape, or form, then email me at media@themountaineer.com and we'll get something sorted for you. And finally, if you want to send us a message involving this podcast in any way, shape, or form, click on any individual episode description of the podcast and send us a text. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll see you on Monday with our correspondent, Marianne Rosen. Have a great rest of your day!
Woke up in the crisis bin, so I went to the woods to find my skin. Followed an owl who was swaying with the breeze.
The song that you are currently listening to is called House of Wind, and it's one of the singles from Old Pup's sophomore album, Spider Towns, which is coming out everywhere on February 28th, 2025. The day before the album's wide release, on February 27th, he'll be coming to the Jamestown Mercantile, located at 108 Main Street in Jamestown, to celebrate this new record release. His performance starts at 7 p.m., so be sure to head over to the Jamestown Mercantile to see him perform his material and debut this record.
I got lost in the house of wind, threw up my hands, they danced a jig. The ghosts are eating all my incense sticks. There's a book of poems smashed between the bricks. Moonlight sneaking through the attic walls, a burning chandelier about to fall. Roadside breakfast underneath the door. I heard the blood and the lobby floor.
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local Peak to Peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.